I know you saw the title and you still pressed play. Welcome to Special Educators Resource Room podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer from Positively Learning. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that I have received as a question. I've received this question or some type of variation of it many, many times. So many of us are talking about things like this, maybe in the teacher's lounge, but you're rarely getting support for it. Let's talk about what to do when support staff keeps interrupting instruction. First, let's get something out of the way. If this is happening to you, it doesn't mean you are doing something wrong, and it doesn't mean a paraprofessional is trying to sabotage your teaching. Most of the time, these interruptions are coming from a place of good intentions. Everyone's trying to help. But it is a problem when these interruptions start to derail instruction, distract or confuse students, or undercut the classroom routines you've been working so hard to build. So how do we address it without creating tension, without micromanaging, or making anyone feel like they're doing something terribly wrong? That's exactly what we're going to unpack in this episode, with real talk, practical ideas, and a whole lot of respect for the important work paraprofessionals do every day. Let's dig in. Before jumping to solutions, we need to get clear on why these interruptions might be happening, because how we respond should be based on the root cause. These are the 3 common reasons that I've seen. Number 1, paraprofessionals may be unsure about their role during instruction. Maybe it hasn't been explained when to step in and when to observe. So they might be stepping in too much because they're trying to be useful. Number 2, another common reason might be that they see a student struggling and they want to help, which is incredibly caring. But sometimes that help creates dependency, especially if it starts to become a pattern. And the third most common reason I've seen for interruptions is that paraprofessionals think that they're expected to be doing something at all times. If they're standing back and observing, they might not feel like they're doing enough. So they jump in just to stay busy. Does this sound familiar? Our goal isn't to fix a paraprofessional. It is to create clarity and shared expectations so everyone is supporting students in the most effective way. Now that we have a better understanding, what can we do about it? I know it can feel uncomfortable to address this head on, but I want you to consider this. What if we treated these interruptions not as a correction, but as a coaching moment? Because when you shift from you're doing this wrong to here's what I've noticed and here's what would help, the tone changes. So here's how you might start the conversation to shift from correction to collaboration. You could say, I really appreciate how tuned in you are to our students. I've noticed that when I'm teaching, sometimes students get a little confused when more than one adult is talking or stepping in. I'd love to brainstorm how we can make that less overwhelming for them. This opens the door for problem solving together. You're not assigning blame. You can then follow up with, let's talk about what that could look like during whole group, or let's talk about what that could look like during small group. This small shift in tone can make a huge difference in how your feedback is received. And of course, it's building long-term trust with paraprofessionals. You also may need to get more specific about roles during instruction. So one of the most helpful things I've ever done is just to create a simple visual of what support looks like during each part of the day. This doesn't need to be a long manual. It doesn't need to be a whole training packet. It could just be a one-pager with the following. What am I doing? What are you doing? What are students doing? For example, during a whole group read aloud, teacher, that's you, reads the story, pauses for questions. Paraprofessional can monitor for engagement, take notes on student participation, gently offer prompts if needed or appropriate. Students, they're listening, responding, turning pages with visual cues. Everybody's on the same page, literally. Even if you don't have a written visual, just having that conversation out loud and repeating it a few times at the start of the school year or anytime you have new routines, this can do wonders. I have one of these charts in the Paraprofessional training binder. I will link it in the show notes. So sometimes paraprofessionals may interrupt because they see a student struggling and they don't know what else to do to support them. A quick pause for a story time. I remember it was maybe my third or fourth year teaching where I had a lesson with a small group in admin. And admin, I didn't really know that well, I should say. I was in a huge school. This admin was observing me and the lesson went pretty well. I was pretty happy. And I got reamed on the feedback. This admin let me know that I wasn't letting my students struggle enough and that learning and progress was made during that struggle. And they were absolutely right, but I was still pretty new at 3 or 4 years in. This was a huge mindset shift for me. And I started planning times for my students to grapple with the material where I wasn't coming in with a prompt or to save them, but I let them struggle for an appropriate amount of time. Not sure if paraprofessionals would know this, but that's something that we can share. Okay, let's get back to the steps. What we can do when paraprofessionals interrupt when they see a student struggling and they don't know what else to do. You can ask yourself, what are the most common triggers for paraprofessional interruptions? Is it when a student's calling out, falling behind, looking confused? For each of those scenarios, you can create a quiet support plan. Here are some examples you can use during a conversation with a paraprofessional. If a student doesn't respond during the lesson, please jot down their name and I'll circle back. If a student gets up or seems distracted, please give them a visual reminder or use one of our signal cards. This way, the paraprofessional is still going to feel empowered to help, but it's in ways that support the flow of the lesson, not derail it. And bonus tip, let them know it's okay to not intervene. Observation is support too. Some of the best paraprofessionals I've ever worked with were masters of quietly taking data, reading the room, and supporting with presence, not volume. I have one more tip to share, and I realize this is a lot of information. You don't want to try all of these things at once. Just pick and choose what feels comfortable for you. Reflect on how it works or doesn't work, and move on to the next thing. All right, here's the last tip. Build a feedback routine together. Because clear expectations can be great, but they need maintenance. We all get into routines and we sometimes fall into old habits. So what I recommend is setting up a weekly 5-minute check-in with paraprofessionals. Just 5 minutes to say, what went well this week? Anything you want to tweak? What support do you need from me? It's just a small moment of collaboration, but it keeps communication open and it prevents tension from building up. Plus, it's going to send that clear message. We're in this together. As I think about these reflection questions, this would work for co-teachers too, right? Let's quickly recap. If you're working with a paraprofessional that seems to be interrupting your lessons all the time, please do not panic. It doesn't mean they're trying to take over, and it doesn't mean you've lost control. It just means it's time for a reset. You want to understand why the interruptions are happening. We want to shift our mindset from correction to collaboration. It might be a sign to get more specific about roles during instruction. We might want to pre-plan some strategies for those what-ifs, and then create a 5-minute weekly feedback routine. You've got this, and the paraprofessional you work with, they want to get it right too. If this episode helped, would you please take 30 seconds to leave a quick review? It helps more than you know. And please pass it along to any teammate who is also navigating paraprofessional collaboration this school year. Thanks for tuning in this week. Next week's episode is all about IEP meetings gone sideways. I can't wait for you to hear it. I'll catch you next time in the Special Educators Resource Room. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm dying to ask, what'd you think? Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons so that you never miss an episode. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at positivelylearningblog.com. See you next week for more special education solutions.